Hi, my name is Derek, and I want to talk to you today about code review. In the past, code review for me has been too often either a cursory checklist that we just walk through and then say, oh, looks good to me, or it's been a contentious process where someone is gatekeeping and trying to keep us out of, trying to keep our code out of their pristine code base. But I've thought a lot about this over my career, and I really have thought, how do we get a learning and collaborative process out of this? And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So just a few things to talk about before we get into the learning process. Why do we code review? One, well, we want to prevent bugs. We want to have a good code review process. We want to ensure consistency in our code base. Those are two main reasons why we code review. We may have to have some sort of uh, we have some sort of compliance checks that we have to follow, or we're required to for another reason. And those are good, but they're really pushing us at, okay, getting a consistent debuggable quality code base. Some things that I like to recommend in any code review process is if you can automate your tedious checks, you're going to be much better off. Because what I mean by this is you don't want to be arguing about two spaces versus four spaces versus tabs versus semicolons. You can just lint that, make it part of your commit process, and then just be done with it. And don't worry about. Plus, computers are good at checking for that stuff. Why have a human check for it when a computer can do it much better and more consistently than you can? So yeah, getting that consistent process where you just remediate things automatically is going to be so important to have a smooth process for your code review. Another thing that I think is really important is making good time for your code review. And as you grow through your career, you'll get better at estimating how long it takes you to build things. But fitting in all of those extras is really important. And that's why a lot of estimates fail. You don't take the time to think about, okay, I need the code review process or working with others or the testing process. So instead of saying, oh yeah, will this be done by Friday? Sure, I'm going to have it done. You can say, well, I'm not going to have it, instead of saying, I'm going to have it done on Friday, you can say, oh yeah, I'm going to have it ready for review on Friday. And that's a better way to, kind of approach those estimates, because you're done with the coding, the first round of the coding, but it doesn't end there. So now that we've got that out of the way, how do we make this a teaching process? I mean, we're looking over each other's work, and it's kind of a very personal thing. You're putting your work out there and having someone else look at it and review it. And that can be a very nervous and difficult process. So how do we make it a great collaborative teaching process? One thing that is important to remember is that this is not a final exam. It doesn't end when you turn in your work for the code review, for your pull request or your code review or whatever your process is at your organization. This is just the beginning of a next stage where you work with somebody to find out those details about, okay, is this working? What could we have done better? Do we need to change anything right now? Do we change stuff for the future? And so that's a really important piece of it. And yes, and we need to share knowledge with this. That is something that good organizations spend a lot of time focusing on. And how do we share that knowledge during a code review? Well, it's important to get everybody involved in it that can at some level or at some code review, and not just have it be a manager just looking over things and then passing it on. It's important to make this a collaborative process where you expect some back and forth. You say, okay, well, why is this happening here? Ask those questions. And that's going to be so important because it's going to help us share the knowledge and talk over these things rather than just turning in an assignment and being done with it. And like I said, everybody should be getting involved, and that includes junior level developers. Even if you are early in your career, you still have a lot to contribute to a code review. I've worked at a number of places that they invite the whole team to code review, but then it just means that to pass a code review, you just need like 2 people to sign off on it. But what that allows them to do is get everybody to get involved and get practice reading through code, making comments about it, asking questions. And that asking questions is what's so important and what makes it a learning process, because you might not understand, okay, well, why did you do it this way? Or, I've one common question is like, okay, in other parts of the code base, I've seen this, this done in this manner, but you chose to do it in a different manner. And just asking why is really important, and it allows you to learn as a junior engineer, so that you can understand the decision-making process that others around you are making. And this is readable code is just so important for our process. If you have to like sit through and read through a bunch of code, and by the way, I recommend not making your pull requests huge. It's another way to help with reading through it. If you have to read through 10,000 lines of code, you're going to zone out and like lose interest and just not be able to like give it your full attention through all that code. So doing it in increments can be useful, but also being able to read the code is so important. This is some PHP code, and I don't expect you to know it, to know what this means, because I wrote it and I can't even really remember what it means. Now, take, for example, some code like this. Again, even if you don't know a bit of PHP code, you can kind of see some things that are going on. We're mapping an array, we're parsing something, we're looking at the profile % complete. And just think about how you would review this versus that other one. This is so much better because you don't need comments to tell you, okay, this is what I'm doing here. You don't have to ask those questions because some of those questions are already answered for you just by the naming of the variables and the method names and whatnot. So another really crucial piece of your code review process is, how do you write the feedback? Again, we're not grading a final exam here. We're working through something with somebody. And that's an important concept to switch our mindset from, being that gatekeeper saying, does this pass or not, to saying, okay, is this good enough? How can we improve it? Ask questions rather than just saying no. So let's turn around that negative feedback and look at ways that we can get our code review comments more easy to understand, and in a way that we can coach people, because giving insightful feedback accelerates your learning and growth. And you talk about this engineer who is formerly from AWS talks about readability and system understanding, and that just helps you long term in your team. So even if your first code reviews are taking a lot longer than you would hope, you're going to get better at it, because you're going to, just like with anything, you're going to practice and practice, and over time you're going to learn more about the system, you're going to learn more about code reviewing, and you're going to just understand how other people are approaching things. And that's just going to speed up your team over time. So to avoid negative comments, commenting with kindness is the most important thing that I can think of. Remember, this is somebody that you're working with to build something together. So, and you don't want to put it in a system where you're blaming someone, saying you or your. What you want to say is, give them some positive feedback. Comments can be phrases, questions, or suggestions. For example, this comment that I made for someone, look at what I said at the end. Would this work better in this instance? I think that what the person did probably wasn't what they intended to do, but I don't know 100% of what was going through their mindset or everything else that's going on. So just in case I miss something, it's so much easier to say, okay, phrase it as a question, because that opens up a conversation rather than making them defensive and trying to say, okay, well, I really should have done it this way. It just lets that back and forth happen much more fluidly. And when you're making these sorts of comments, I find that video commenting can actually speed things up, especially if you are and it gives it a personal touch. And especially if you are working across disparate time zones or disparate working environments. For example, we have a number of engineers in India and then a number of engineers in the US. So when we make a comment, we don't really expect an answer on it until the next day, because our working hours just don't overlap very much at all. So instead of trying to go back and forth and spend a lot of time with it, what we do is we make video comments, and we use a tool called Loom, but there's lots of tools out there. It works directly with GitHub. I know there's other ways to do it too. But we just click record. We kind of go through, okay, our questions, and then it just makes it really easy to give it that personal touch, so that it feels like more of a conversation. Because when you just type stuff, sometimes you lose that inflection in your voice, and it makes it just a little bit less personal. And another thing that used to happen a lot when I worked in a physical office, I've been remote for about 5 years now, and I like it. But one thing I miss is the ability to just like step into another coworker's, office space and work stuff out with them. And I like to call this the accidental code review. You might call it an informal pair programming as well. But basically what happens is, you're working through a problem together, and you're actually solving some problems before you even get to the code review. So when you actually get to the pull request process, what you've done is you have somebody else who's already seen the code, already helped you build parts of it, so that knowledge is already there. That can be more difficult when you are remote, but there's a lot of tools out there, and the tools are getting much better. I know that some IDEs offer pair programming support. Honestly, I've done this a lot just with a screen share and putting up your code, and someone saying, "Oh, why isn't this working? Do you see anything here?" And then saying, "Oh, well, look at line 12. What's going on there?" And I'll say, "Oh, yes, I figured it out." Or no, that's right. And just working out those details together. It's not the formal code review, but it is part of that process of moving your code forward and learning from each other. And I think the most important thing, especially for a junior developer early in their career, is to ask for help. Hopefully your manager has created an environment that encourages collaboration and ways to ask for help. But if they haven't, that's okay. You can just speak up and say, can I get involved in more code reviews? Can I get feedback on what I'm building earlier in the process, so I haven't built it all out. That's a key thing. Just asking for feedback and help early on is going to be really crucial. And even if your manager's too busy, hopefully there's another colleague that you can talk to and get that some eyes on your code, and more important, and just as importantly, eyes on someone else's code as early in the process so that you can learn from each other. So I have a lot of resources. You can reach out to me later to, I can send you the list throughout the conference. I'd like to say thank you all for listening to my talk, and I hope to keep this conversation going. Feel free to send me an email. And one final thanks is land acknowledgement for the Ho-Chunk Nation, who is the original occupants of where I'm giving this talk from today. I'd like to thank you all for your time today.